Continuing on with Lecture Day 6, we are finishing up with the Persian Wars between Greece and, of course, Persia. So, we have just finished the Battle of Salamis, fought in September of 480 BCE, where the Athenian navy set a trap thanks to Themistocles, tricking the Persians into thinking that the Athenians on the island of Salamis were undefended, and then all of a sudden the Athenian navy appears from around the side and attacks the Persian navy and completely decimates it. And so Xerxes, the king of Persia, is forced to basically retreat. Well, about a year later, we have the Battle of Plataea, actually 11 months later, in August of 479 BCE, and it's fought actually on land. This one is actually fought in an area away from some of the mountains, but you can see actually the mountains in the background. This is the actual battleground where they fought on it. Very hilly, as you can kind of see that there's like hills, and very, very rocky, rugged terrain, because that is the terrain features of what most of Greece looks like, is very rocky and hilly area, as well as mountains, which we've mentioned before. Well, the Battle of Plataea was between the Hellenic League of all the Greek city-states, or at least many of the Greek city-states, banded together to work together. Remember, the Hellenic League was Athens, Sparta, and Corinth, as well as a bunch of other ones that we don't need to name. The Greek city-states did that again with the Hellenic League, merging in an army of about 40,000 hoplites and a few other soldiers. Mostly, again, hoplites, with their big phalanx formation and their large shields being used along with their spears. And the Persian army had about 100,000 soldiers at this battle, but it kind of lacked supplies, so it went in not well rested and not ready exactly for the biggest fight. And the Greeks went in ready to go, ready to fight, and the Greeks win decisively. Many, many more Persians are killed in this battle than Greeks, and so the Persian army basically retreats out of Greece yet again. And so Xerxes is losing constantly at this point, and never really sends a big army against Greece again. He and again his immediate successors after him, the immediate kings after him, including him, for the next 30 years do send a couple armies every now and then to attack Greece, but nothing the size of the 500,000-man army that he had beforehand, which was hurt at both Thermopylae as well as Salamis, and definitely not even one as big as this 100,000 one at Plataea either. And so the next 30 years, yes, there's fighting between the Greeks and Persians in Greece, but it's very minor. And so it's nothing major, and none of the battles we need to discuss. And this basically is the end of the Persian Wars. Okay, and again, they're called the Persian Wars because they were fought between the Greeks and the Persians, and it is told from the perspective of the Greeks in most sources, okay? And so you usually use that kind of thing for the naming, or who wins it sometimes gets to name the wars. So, of course, they are called the Persian Wars because the Persians were the villains coming in to attack the Greeks, and if you're from the perspective of the Greeks, you're saying, oh, the Persians are coming, right? Okay. Well, remember Themistocles, the hero of the Battle of Salamis, okay? The man that tricked the Persian navy into going in and being surprised by all of the 200 triremes. Well, he starts actually making a name for himself in Athens afterwards politically. And Athens has been burned to the ground. It's in this period of rebuilding, and it's going to take time to start rebuilding it in the late 470s. 479 is when they start rebuilding it, before even the Battle of Plataea is fought yet. And so they're rebuilding it, and he starts coming up with a couple plans politically, and some political measures that he tries to push towards the archons, and then when he gets elected to different positions, he tries to push them as well. Unfortunately, these are expensive ideas. So what are they? Well, one of them is to build a wall, okay, around the city of Athens, and another wall along the street. Okay, there's a street that goes between, or a road between Athens and Piraeus. Piraeus is on the coast, okay? It's this port city that has a road between it and Athens. And the road is very unprotected. It's about 5 to 6 miles long, and if we go to another map right here, where we actually had the Battle of Salamis, here was the island of Salamis, here is Athens, and right here on the coast is the city of Piraeus, or town of Piraeus. And so it's a small town, but it's where all of the supplies and all the ships that carry the wine and olive oil, as well as pottery, from Athens to, fund their colonies as well as fund their expensive lifestyles in Athens, kind of because they became very wealthy, remember, doing this with this trade. And so that is all the ships leave from the port of Piraeus. Well, also other food supplies from the colonies, like wheat and things like that, are brought from the colonies, as well as elsewhere around Greece and everything, to Athens through the port as well. So supplies are back and forth. And yes, there's the road, so it gets heavy travel. Well, he starts thinking, Themistocles that is, starts thinking, what if we are attacked again by the Persians? Or what, because at this period, the Persians are still a threat, possibly. And this is during those 30 years that they're going to be kind of every now and then a few battles. Nothing major again, but he doesn't know that. And he also has this idea, what if, say, another city-state, one of the other polis, attacks us? And so what happens then? Well, we can all retreat. Everybody in Attica can retreat to the city of Athens and stay in the city of Athens and be safe because of the walls that we're building. Well, yes, we're going to have the walls, but we'll run out of supplies eventually unless we get support from Piraeus and supplies from Piraeus. So he says that why not build a wall around Piraeus on the edge, which they already kind of had one, and then also strengthen the wall here, and then also build a double-line wall on one side and a wall on the other, of the street, or the road, between the two towns, between the city and the town. And so that's what he suggests. And a lot of people like this idea, but it's expensive, super expensive. And so while it would defend them, it's too expensive at the time when they've got to rebuild the entire city of Athens anyway at this point, and they just don't have the money for this. He also suggests they start building 20 new warships, as well as other ships, per year. Okay? 20 new triremes a year is what he wants. And yes, that would defend Athens as well. And Athens is becoming basically becoming a thalassocracy. Remember, a maritime empire on its own at this point. It's becoming very good with its navy, shipping all of those olive oil and wine supplies everywhere to its colonies and other Greek city-states. And so it's using its navy a lot. And its navy saved them from the Persians. Well, he wants to keep increasing the navy by 20 ships per year, which again, people are like, this is a good idea because it invests into what we are the best at already. And it protects our shipping empire. However, what does it cause? Well, it's going to cost a lot of money, and that will cause bankruptcy when we're also trying to build the city back again. And so those two suggestions don't end up happening while Themistocles is in power politically, because it's too expensive at that time. He's kind of bringing them up when, it's a big idea, a good idea to bring them up, but not too expensive, too much expensive wise to be able to do it now. And political enemies start coming out of the woodwork at this point all over the place and start bashing him on these two ideas. One of them even starts a drinking song about him, making fun of him during the drinking song. When people would be drinking wine, they'll start singing songs. Well, one of those songs was about Themistocles' crazy ideas. Another one makes another song about him, kind of like the basically how to bash a politician today. You can make up all sorts of political jokes and stuff like that, and videos and different things like that now, and political cartoons or memes. These were the memes of the day, drinking songs. Okay, some of the political enemies also started saying that that Themistocles was secretly plotting with the Persians to help the Persians eventually take over Athens. And while that's probably not true, there's no evidence that it was true at all, that we as historians have found, it was enough to really sink Themistocles politically. And it resulted eventually only a mere 9 years after he won the Battle of Salamis and was the hero of Athens, to the point where he is ostracized in the year 471, 9 years after his great victory at Salamis, and his plan at Salamis. He is now exiled, ostracized, and kicked out of the city and kicked out of all of Attica, and has to be gone for quite a while. And it was longer than just 10 years. It was a longer period than just the normal 10 years because of this. And he actually dies in exile, never being able to return to Athens. And it's kind of sad because he was the hero, and now, because of a couple political ideas that were kind of not the smartest, he became the enemy to his political enemies, and made the enemy by his enemies to everybody else. Everybody else kind of thought he was wrong. Well, soon after he is exiled, or as he is doing his political workings, we have a couple other big instances happening in Athens, and one of them is in the 478, only about 2 years after the Battle of Salamis. Themistocles is still around during this. There is an alliance of Athens with several other city-states, and they decide to sign this alliance on the island of Delos, out in the middle of the Aegean Sea. The sacred island of Delos. And the sacred island of Delos has this very large vault in the caves and right near the fortress of the city on the island, and it's the treasury. This big giant vault, basically a giant safe, and a locked area up with all the gold and everything in it, and that all of the city-states in this alliance, including Athens, would put their money in the Delian treasury, okay? And eventually, because of the alliance that is signed on the island of Delos, as well as the money being kept there, this alliance becomes known as the Delian League. It is going to be very important in Lecture Day 7, okay? Well, soon after that, of course, 7 years later, Themistocles is exiled and dies far away. While he is exiled, a young aristocrat, who was born in the year 495 BCE and lives until the year 429 BCE, is this man right here, a man named Pericles. Pericles is an aristocrat, meaning that he can trace his family tree back to the early Mycenaeans, or says he can. Okay? So he's already got plenty of money and some kind of political power because of that. Remember, they would have symposiums, greeting people and having them come to his home and doing things like that to get political power. Well, he starts realizing that's not enough. He needs more political power than just other aristocrats. And so he starts talking to the Thetes. The Thetes are the lowest class of free men in Athenian society, and really Greek society. They're the poorest people. They're the hardest workers because they are the people that are on the bottom of the ships, of the triremes, and row the oars of the ships. Okay? They're the rowers on these big giant trireme warships, or relatively big for back then. And so he starts talking to them, and he says, I know that you have been basically disenfranchised and not given equal opportunity compared to any other citizen. I can make that happen if you give me your votes. And when I get elected, I will make sure that I repay it by making sure you get more help. And so he promises things like better wages, more representation in government, not only from himself, but he'll also talk to his buddies to make sure that they also represent the Thetes and listen to the Thetes. And so that's what ends up happening. He gets support from the Thetes, and they support him, and he gets elected to be one of the Archons in around the year 460 or so, 465, 461 period, somewhere around there, okay, circa 460s. During this period also, in Athens, there are many other reforms. It gets to the point where any citizen at all, well, at least men, can propose law changes, okay, changes in law. Now, yes, it would have to be voted on, but anyone can just suggest it. And so that gets a lot of the Thetes starting to do that, and they can suggest things, and then knowing that their guy, Pericles, is in office, it might end up happening. And so that makes some big changes. One of the big other things that happens in the 460s, especially under Piraeus, is he starts actually building the Parthenon, which is the big giant temple on the Acropolis. Okay, he is responsible for that. He is responsible for funding that. He also starts funding the walls from Athens to Piraeus. Remember the thing that got Themistocles slandered a lot because it was so expensive? Well, it's 15 years later, at least. And so now it's the time that you can actually suggest these things. The city has been rebuilt. The Parthenon is being built to the gods. And why not build the walls to Piraeus? And then he also suggests that they build 20 new ships per year, which gets the Thetes really happy because there's going to be more of them and more people employed as Thetes that were possibly not out of work. And falling into debt slavery, or, well, not debt slavery because of the laws from so long. But instead, either way, there's going to be more ships. Again, one of those ideas that Themistocles came up with, but Pericles decides, that was a good idea. It was at the wrong time, but now is the right time. And I've got enough voters, the Thetes, on my side. And so that's what ends up happening with Pericles. He becomes very important in the next lecture because he is going to help cause a bit of a war called the Peloponnesian War, which we will discuss next time. And it is between the different country or city-states, the polis, in Greece. It is a big giant, not civil war because Greece is not one country. It's a war between all the different polises or city-states because they're their own basically own countries, right? And we're going to talk about several of the different heroes, Alcibiades, Nicias, and others. And we will also start talking about an area called Macedonia, or Macedon, okay, where a young man named Philip II becomes king, and his young son is going to become a very important person in the lecture after that. So we're going to talk about Macedon at the end of the Peloponnesian War. So that will be all next lecture video, which will be day 7. Have a good day.